It's hard to not be content going home after all that. Thank you, musicians. Wonderful. If you would, please take your Bibles with me and turn in them to the prophet Micah. Micah chapter 5. And if you would, please stand as you turn. This morning's reading will take place in Micah chapter 5, verses 4 and 5. Micah 5, 4 and 5. Please follow along as I read. And he shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall dwell secure. For now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be their peace. May the Lord add his blessing this morning to the reading of his word. You may be seated. So as I've shared the last couple weeks, we are doing a short series on the concept of peace throughout the Bible. And I want 2 Thessalonians 3:16 to sort of serve as the banner over this study. And let me just read that to you. 2 Thessalonians 3:16. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times in every way. The Lord be with you all. So let me ask you, what isn't covered in the phrase at all times in every way? Yeah. What's left out? Nothing. There's nothing left out of that phrase. At all times. Give you peace at all times in every way. So this is the sort of the banner passage that I'd like to be over our series on peace. Great blessing recently. Nathan Freeman has been taking his computer skills and helping the church out in different ways. And one of the ways that he did that is he created an email account. Forever we've had email accounts with like different endings. Well, now the email accounts have FBC Silvis or something such like that. I'm not quite exactly what it is. Sure what it is. But anyway, he made this email, and in order for me to check that email, I need to check another email. I initially thought it was going to like redirect everything to my email, and maybe that's possible. I have no idea. I'd have no idea how to do that. But so he created this other email, and he was curious to know if I was checking that email that he worked so hard to create. Which, of course, I wasn't checking that email that he worked so hard to create. I was checking my own personal email. So he had created a really cool app that will take the audio of my message, like in seconds, and spit out a page summary of my sermon, which would be really helpful for me, like when I prepare to go to Ethiopia and want to go through all my Leviticus series, but not have to listen to hours and hours and hours of messages, you know? So it's a really cool app, and he sent it, apparently, to that email that I never check. And he's kind of getting annoyed that I don't check the stuff that he worked on. So he thought, I want to test this, and so he had AI listen to one of my messages and give a scathing criticism of our message and our church, okay? So, of course, he sends that to the email that I don't check, you know, so it's like a bomb waiting to go off. Well, it just so happened that Pastor Alex and him were talking, and I get into Alex's car, and Nathan's on the speaker in his truck. And Nathan says, "Hey, I sent you that app. Did you find it yet?" And I said, "No, I checked my email. I didn't see it." He goes, "I sent it into the church one." And I'm like, oh, right on. So I don't know how to check the church one. So Alex takes my phone. By the way, Alex was in on this whole thing with Nathan. They curated the perfect criticism of me and the church and sent it. So Alex is sitting next to me with Nathan on speakerphone as I'm scrolling at this new email, and I see this email from Jake Sterling. That's the name they came up with. And so I'm looking, and I stopped looking for the app because I see like response to Sunday's service or something, which is always like, oh boy, here we go, you know. So I click on it. It's like a page long, and I'm like, dude, this guy is tearing me to shreds. And Alex is like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, dude, I got this email. This guy's just ripping me apart. And he's like, read it. And I'm like, Nathan doesn't have time for me to read this long email. And there's a pause. And Nathan goes, I got time. So I read this email. It's like just getting pummeled with bullets, you know? And I'm like, dude, who is this guy? So I look him up on Facebook. There's a guy that is named Jake Sterling. I feel like I've seen him in the audience before, you know? I'm like, jeez. So I get to, we're meeting Seth, and I get to lunch, and I give Seth the phone. I'm like, you got to read this. I'm ready to read it to the deacon board. I'm like, they need to know how much people think I'm screwed up, and they need to tell me if I am screwed up and what's wrong with me, and they need to say we agree or we disagree, change or stay the same. So I'm like, I'm getting ready for this full-on attack by Jake Sterling. And Alex, what did you say to me? How did I know? That it was you guys and not an actual person? Oh, yeah. So while we're at lunch, another email comes through as Seth's reading the email. And he goes, dude, another email just came from Jake Sterling. And it says, you haven't got back to me in a week. I seem to have made the right decision. Because I didn't see the email. So they are just destroying me, all right? Now, I appreciate you're not laughing very hard because you think it's mean, right? Yes. You want me to read the email? Yeah, I'll send it to you. Honestly, I read Becky the email, not telling her what happened, you know? And she's like, honestly, there's a few good points. I'm like, all right. Yeah. In fact, Nathan said that when AI finished it, it said this particular statement is going to live rent-free in his head. and it has, actually. Okay, so in those moments, I am tempted, of course, to not exhibit peace, right? In that moment, I am tempted to be very disheveled, unsettled in that moment, where something that's very near and dear to me is dissected and torn apart and criticized. It's in that moment where I don't experience peace, or I'm tempted not to. And so the thought of this series, according to 2 Thessalonians 3, that the Lord of peace himself may give you peace at all times in every way. I think a diagnostic that will help us work through this series, and I hope to take 2 each week in the weeks that we have left. This morning will be the who of peace and the what of peace. Next week will be, Lord willing, the when and the where and the how and the why in the final week. There's nothing special about these questions, but what these questions are is they are exhaustive. If God himself is going to give you peace at all times in every way, then there should be an answer for the who, what, when, where, how, and why of peace. And so this morning, I hope to talk about the who and the what of peace. I shared with you in our introductory message last week that God has prepared creation to be an abode of peace. That creation is his house, as it were, and that he's invited you to live in, and he wants you to know that his house is typified. The tone of the house, the taste of the house, the feel of the house, the sound of the house is one of peace. It's not one of performance. It's not one that's loud and chaotic. It's one of peace. Undishevelable peace. That's what he wants. He creates it this way, I shared last week, because he ends the creation narrative with day 7, which has no, and there was evening and there was morning the seventh day. It never ends. That it never has an ending formula to day 7, which is to say that all of creation is meant to live in the peace of God unendingly. As you read through the Bible, you find that God says to Israel, I didn't allow them to enter my rest. In other words, the rest was there. There was an exit ramp to rest, but God put traffic cones in front of it. Why? Because they would not lean into him. And because they wouldn't lean into him, he doesn't give them the exit ramp to rest. He doesn't allow them to enter his rest. Why? Because there is no rest for the wicked. And so rest is like this cloud. It's like this oasis that's always within sight. It's always somewhere overhead. But only certain people are living in it, and other people aren't. They're living in the scorched sunlight. They see an oasis, but they can never actually get to the water. It's just a figment of their imagination because they can't get there. And so rest is something God intended for all mankind. His house is typified by rest. It's everywhere that rest is available. And I want you to see that the reason rest is available with God is because God himself is our peace. We have peace most primarily as a state of mind instead of a person. Peace is a person. This is, just consider from Isaiah, you keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. Just think about that word, stayed. Stayed. What is the temptation when it comes to peace or not having peace? The temptation is to be scatterbrained about it. Like, until this is figured out, then I'll have peace. Until that's figured out, then I'll have peace. And God says, no, the person who has peace is the one whose mind is stayed, focused entirely, not on all the tumult around us, not on the mountains quaking or the seas roaring. It's the one whose mind is stayed upon him. So though the mountains shake and they crumble, we will not, because our mind is stayed upon you. So our bodies may crumble, our flesh may rot away, but our hearts won't. People ask me all the time, how's your dad doing? How's your dad doing? Stephen Wilcox just reached out this week. How's your dad doing? Here's my typical response. His body is wasting away. His spirit is phenomenal. And of course he'd say, well, you don't see me in my dark times, and I don't, but I can ask my mom. But he has those, but overwhelmingly he's choosing peace. He's choosing peace because he's choosing to look upon the Lord. That's the idea. Imagine if I took this verse and twisted it up a little bit, and I said this. It said, you keep him loving basketball, whose mind is stayed on you because he looks to you. You keep him loving basketball, whose mind is stayed on you because he looks to you. What would you imagine God doing if this verse were true? Why would I love basketball in watching God? Because God is doing what? He's playing basketball. So the idea is that we learn peace by looking at the person who's practicing peace, who's living within peace, who's perfectly calm. So I would want to do a layup like the guy that I'm watching doing a layup, or take a free throw shot in the way that he does and bounce the ball like him and all sorts of. This is what it is. To look at God, you're looking at peace. So when everything else is giving way, our minds are stayed on him, and that peace transcends. It falls on us. This is the movement. God is the person at peace. This is what's in our introductory verse in 2 Thessalonians. Now may the Lord of peace himself, he's the Lord of peace, give you peace at all times in every way. The Lord be with you all. Paul will continue and he says, for God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. This is the idea. To look at God is to look at peace, the person of it. God will even characterize his entire covenant with Israel by calling it a covenant of peace. For the mountains may depart and the hills may be removed, but my steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the Lord, who has compassion on you. My covenant of peace. So yesterday at the wedding, Elijah gives the rings to Owen, so Owen can put a ring on Marissa, and Marissa put a ring on Owen. And what I call those is the tokens of the union. The ring is a token of the union. It's a symbol of the union. So if God had a symbol to give Israel to say, look, to look at this is to be the symbol of our covenant, what would that symbol be? A tattoo, a ring, what would it be? Well, this is what he gives them. For you to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, everybody say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbath, my rest, my peace. For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. In other words, that to look at a person connected to God, you should see peace. Unrivaled peace. To look at a person who's a son or daughter of the Lord. You should see an undisheveled human being in the wake of all the craziness of this earth. Peace is to typify them. And so it's not surprising that if God is the God of peace, what should we expect his son to be like? Peaceful. Exactly. Look at how the prophets talk about Jesus. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. That in Jesus' darkest hour, to the point where his body is so crushed by what's ahead of him in the cross, that he falls, it says, on his face in the Garden of Gethsemane, which is the word for crushing. So he's being crushed right now. He's sweating drops of blood. And do you know what he says to his apostles in that time? I always used to think he says to them, go and pray for me. It's not what he says. He says, go and pray for yourselves. That Jesus, in the midst of being crushed to the point where it's the olive press, it's oozing oil, he's oozing blood, he has the presence of mind, the peace of mind to say to his apostles, pray for yourselves for what is about to take place. Is that shocking? Is that shocking? I mean, it's just overwhelming that someone should be visited on their deathbed. This was something recently said about Melinda Seawee that, in her last moments, she was asking her children how they were doing, checking on them in her last moments. This is the beauty of someone who has the peace that passes all understanding. And Jesus exhibited that. It's who he was. And this is why I quoted from Micah this morning, where he says, and he shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall dwell secure. For now he shall be great to the ends of the earth. And he shall be their peace. And he shall be their peace. See, this is the beauty of Christ. That when you look to him, he keeps you in perfect, we'll talk about wholeness or peace, whose mind is stayed upon him because he trusts in you. I shared last week that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so the things that tend to rob our peace are the things that are subject to what? Change, right? As I mentioned, Owen and Marissa get married. Well, guess what? I remember the day it hit me that Becky and I, one of us, and it's just like, I never thought of this, one of us is going to outlive the other. I remember the night that descended on me. And I'm like, geez, I wasn't ever thinking about that. And that, as beautiful as marriage is, it's subject to change. Your finances, your job, your health, your kids, everything, your house, it's all subject to change. Finn's graduation party's tonight. Becky's looking at the weather because it is subject to change. She said, if it rains, I don't know, all this work, all this is going to rain. And I'm like, Becky. Yeah, you're right, it probably is going to rain. No. So all of these things, where do you put your hope? And he says, keep your mind, keep your brain fixated on me. Why? Because he is the place, the person of peace. Of course, we live in a fallen creation. And that makes our peace, if it's here, so tumultuous. But what's beautiful is that Christ is like a second Adam that's been raised out of the earth. Like Adam was raised out of the earth, Christ was raised out of the grave. The first person Christ sees upon exiting the tomb is a woman who is like Eve, who represents his bride, the church. And Christ is now, as Daniel read, turning every seeming defeat into a victory until he has put every enemy beneath his foot. And this is what's happening. The question is will we be optimistic in that, or will we be pessimistic in that? That's the question. And so this escorts us into the what of peace. The what of peace. And so the first person is the first question is the who of peace. And who is the who of peace? Yes, God, his Son, Christ, who came and to be our Prince of Peace, to be our peace. And so now we want to talk about the what of peace. The what of peace. What would you say is the definition of peace? The definition of peace. If I had you all write down in one sentence definition of peace, what would you write? Great thoughts. A lot of good thoughts. I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. I'm going to look to Jesus' words. You can't go wrong there, right? In him telling you essentially the opposite of peace. Because when he betrays the opposite of peace, it helps us understand what is the definition of peace. And this comes from Luke 12:51. He says, "Do you think that I have come to give peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather," everybody say it. Okay, so this is a contrast, correct? He says, I didn't come to give you this. In fact, I came to give you this. And he expects you to see that as the opposite of what he didn't come to bring, right? So if the opposite of peace is division, what is the definition of peace? I like it, yeah. Unity, wholeness. So according to Jesus, the definition of peace is wholeness. That's the definition of peace. Okay? Wholeness. Everybody say wholeness. Okay. So what this does is this helps set us up to diagnose our state of peace. If the opposite of peace is division and the presence of peace is wholeness, it helps us to look at ourselves and to say, okay, where do I think my peace is held? Okay? Because if I don't feel like I have peace right now, it's really easy to assign that 15% to an area of life, right? What is that 15% for you? I can tell you what my 15% are. I've got several of them. What does that add up to? Right, so we all have a section in our lives where we say, if this will work out, the 100% will be complete. I will be whole. If this will work out. But what is the this? Because that is where you can, what an idol is. That's the idol. That's where you can sniff out the idol in your life, or idols in your life. Okay, Now, this isn't to say that you won't have things that you pray for. It won't be to say that there are things that are sad in your life that you wish were different. But the next question is where are you looking to fix that? That's the big question, okay? Because this is what Samuel will say in his last words, effectively, to Israel as they're pursuing a king in place of the prophet. He says this, do not turn aside from following the Lord. So that's the mind stayed upon him. Don't turn aside. Don't turn to the right. Don't turn to the left. Follow the Lord wholly, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Don't have your heart look like that grid in just a second, the pie chart. Don't have it be divided. Don't have a section where you're not stayed upon the Lord. And do not turn aside after empty things that cannot profit or deliver, for they are empty. Okay? So, here's the deal. Everybody's got a 15%. Everybody's got something that's weighing heavy on their heart that's tempting to tear their heart asunder, okay? To have them be divided. How would it get divided? Well, it would get divided if you turn after something else to fix that problem other than looking to the Lord, looking wholly to the Lord. Let me give you an example. This is from 2 Kings, I believe it is. It's King Asa. And he's the king of the southern tribes. And lo and behold, the northern tribes, the northern kingdom are coming to attack Asa. And so here's how it's told that they attack the kingdom of Judah. They come close to them, and with wood and stone, it tells you that. With wood and stone, they began to build a city, a blockade, that blocked anything from entering the city, okay? So the way that the northern tribes are going to take over the southern tribes is they, with wood and stone, build a blockade that stops all resources from coming to Judah. Now, you're King Asa. You're about to watch your family and your kingdom starve to death, or starve to the point where you can't really lift up a sword and fight, or pick up a bow and shoot an arrow. You're getting to the point where you're going to watch your kingdom fade away and get overrun. Would that be tempting to divide your heart? Yes, that would be a 15% thing, that you don't want this to happen, okay? So you don't want it to happen. The question is where do you look to prevent that from happening? It's not a good thing. You'd think that God would be on the same page as you, that he doesn't want a couple of his tribes, Benjamin and Judah and Simeon, to be destroyed. You'd think that God would be on your side. So God's not going to want that to happen. Where do you look to get that to not happen? Who do you feast your eyes on to keep that, to circumvent that, to mitigate that? Where do you look? Well, I'll tell you where Asa looked. Asa looked to the kingdom of Syria, who was more powerful than the northern tribes of Israel. And so, what he does is he sends gold and silver to the kingdom of Syria and says, please come and scare off the northern tribes. They're about to attack us. And so the king of Syria does that. He starts making his way down. He scares off the northern tribes, and he goes. And this is very instructive. It's very instructive. Because then it says that King Asa took the wood and the stone that the northern tribes were using to build the blockade, and he built 2 cities with it. Why does it tell you that? Why does it tell you these things? Is this just good writing? It just, scatters in a few details? No. Here's why. It wants you to see something very important. What did Asa exchange? He exchanged gold and silver for wood and stone. That's what he did. He exchanged gold and silver for wood and stone. If you Google the weight comparison between silver and stone, silver weighs 3 to 4 times more than the same amount of stone. Gold weighs 7 to 8 times as much as the same amount of stone. Do not turn aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart, and do not turn aside after empty things, weightless, chaff that the wind blows away, but the wheat, the heavy stuff, falls. That God is the gold and the silver. God is the weighty thing. Glory means weight in Hebrew. Kavod means weight. God is the weight. Everything else is empty. It won't deliver. And so he says, as a result of this, he comments to Asa, he says, because, this is his prophet, because you relied on the king of Syria and did not rely on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Syria has escaped you. Were not the Ethiopians and the Libyans a huge army with very many chariots and horsemen? Yet because you relied on the Lord, because your mind was fixed on him, stayed on him, he gave them into your hand. Look it. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless. You know what that word is in Hebrew? Whole. Whose heart is whole towards him. They have a 15%, but it's as though it weren't read. Because although it is a prayer request on their end, their circle is whole, that, Lord, it's you. We don't know what to do, but our eyes are stayed on you. And as a result of that, we have peace. You have done foolishly in this, for from now on, you will have wars. See, this is the idea. The what of peace is wholeness. Wholeness. The definition of peace is that our heart is whole toward God. That's what it is. If your heart is whole toward the Lord, if it is totally stayed upon the Lord, you will have peace. You won't be tempted to turn to this, that, and the other thing to either fix your 15% or get your mind off the 15%. This is why David will pray in Psalm 86. Look at this humble prayer. Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Look at what he says. Unite my heart to fear your name. Why would he say unite my heart? Because his heart is what? It's divided. It's divided here, there, and everywhere. He says, unite my heart. That doesn't mean have all my problems go away. It's no, in the midst of my problems, unite my heart to not stray after trying to fix all my problems my way, or assuage my problems with this substance or this activity, get my mind off it. No, I want my eye on you. I give thanks to you, O Lord my God, with my whole heart, and I will glorify your name forever, for great is your steadfast love toward me. You have delivered my soul from the depths of Sheol. Why would David remind himself of him being saved from Saul about to kill him? Because he's saying to himself, God, you saved me here, so I trust you can save me here. That's the idea. Listen to how David prays for Solomon. Grant to Solomon, my son, a whole heart, that he may keep your commandments, your testimonies, and your statutes, performing all, and that he may build the palace for which I have made provision. Hezekiah gets into a very difficult spot with his health, and he uses his whole heart as leverage for God to answer his prayer. Please, O Lord, remember how I have walked before you in faithfulness and with a whole heart, and have done what is good in your sight. So wholeness is the definition of peace. A mind that is wholly transfixed on God. That is what is the what of peace. So at any given moment, when you see your heart beginning to become divided, you need to understand that if you chase down this rabbit trail, that until this thing gets fixed that's dividing my heart, you will never arrive at peace, ever. I was just thinking that this week. I said to Greg's been helping me a ton on stuff around the house and getting ready for the graduation. And I said to Greg, I can't wait until this graduation party's over. But I thought this morning, after this graduation party's over, I've got some things that I want to get done before sabbatical. And it's just going to turn into this next well, I don't know. The wheel, what is that? Rat race, whatever. Because peace is a moving target. If you look for it on this earth, it's only with a mind stayed upon the Lord that you will actually live in a state of peace, to the point where everything could be crumbling around you, and people will still be delighted to be in a foxhole with you, because they will at least see calmness on their way out. That's the idea. I got to ask you a question here this morning. I want your interpreting lenses to be on. You know, if you were to say, okay, what would dishevel a parent's peace, perhaps more than anything else on earth? And of course, I give you a clue in saying a parent's peace. Because immediately you know the answer to that would be either your children going astray from the Lord or your children dying physically. Those two things are the greatest potential thing to tear your peace asunder as a parent. One of those two things. And I want to point to a person in the scripture that had both of those things happen to both of his sons, and that is Aaron. In the book of Leviticus, Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, go astray spiritually, and they die physically in a moment in the tabernacle when they offer a foreign fire. And so Aaron's in this moment where his pie chart is just totally ripped up. And Moses says something to him in that moment. And I want you to assess whether what Moses said to him is right or wrong. Okay? He says to Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu's brothers, he says, "Do not let the hair of your heads hang loose, and do not tear your clothes, lest you die, and wrath come upon all the congregation. But let your brothers, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning that the Lord has kindled. And do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die. For the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you." And they did, interestingly, according to the word of Moses. Okay? Now, that's the situation. I want you to think to yourself for a moment, did Moses tell them the right thing in this situation, or did he insert his own thoughts on this situation? Most importantly, was God pleased with Moses' thoughts here, or was he displeased with Moses' thoughts here? Okay. Have you had a chance to think about it? Okay. So now it's time to put your money where your mouth is, okay? All right. So who thinks that Moses was right in saying this? Raise your hand. Who thinks Moses was wrong in saying this? Raise your hand. Oh, boy. Okay. Well, this is an interpretive call, so I could be wrong. But I think that Moses was wrong to say this in this moment. I think I can back this up because Aaron doesn't do something he was supposed to do. He didn't eat the sacrifice that day, and Moses gets really upset at him for not doing it. Then once he hears Aaron's response to why he didn't do it, it says Moses was satisfied. Okay? I think Moses is acting out of fear here to say that if you screw this thing up, like this is the spectacle. This is the image of wholeness. If you break wholeness, you mess up actually wholeness. Okay? If you tear your clothes, you rip peace. Because this is the spectacle of peace for Israel and all the world. And so if you let your hair hang down and take it out of your hat, if you do all this stuff, it's going to actually destroy peace. Listen, can something we do destroy God's peace? He is the person of peace. Okay? Light can shine on manure all day, and it won't make the light smell like manure. God is the person of peace. It's really sad because I think actually the righteous thing for Aaron to do would have been to rip his garments. Why? To show that this spectacle was a broken spectacle. Not because of God, but because of the guy wearing the clothes. Because of the priest. Because he was not actually, though he's anointed, internally, was Aaron divided or whole? All we like sheep have gone astray, and all of us have turned to our own way. None of us has followed God wholly. Just think through. How did Jacob's sons get along in Genesis? No, they didn't get along. Were they a whole family or a divided family? They're a divided family. How did David's family get along? What about Solomon's heart? David prays for Solomon to have a whole heart. Did Solomon have a whole heart or a divided heart? Divided with alliances and wives and other gods. And as a result of Solomon's divided heart, God gives them a divided kingdom. And the kingdom separates. You get to the earlier in the book of Judges, one of the tribes almost annihilates the other tribe of Benjamin. What about Hezekiah's undivided heart? He says to God, I've had a whole heart towards you my whole life. But it's actually ironic because it's in this prayer where Hezekiah's health is on the fritz that he has a divided heart, and he's praying to God, but what he really values is longer life over God's will for his life, which was to die. But God listens to him. He gives him 15 years longer, and Hezekiah sacrifices the whole kingdom in those 15 years. Why? Because he had a divided heart between life and God, even though he's praying to God about his problem. So the sad history of Israel in the Old Covenant was torn garments, really. They were a divided heart. So the very best thing Aaron could have done, in my opinion, is to tear his garments and say, God, we need a better answer than this. Because this isn't enough. The very first day the tabernacle opens up, sewage is coming out of the floor. It's like a restaurant opening up, and everybody walks in and like, what am I stepping on? And they're like, we just had a backup. Well, you just cut the cord here. Everything open. And I'm smelling this, and I'm smelling also the chicken. First day the tabernacle opens, people have death in God's house. This is the deal. So Aaron would have done the best thing to tear his garments. And this is why you get to the New Testament, and when Jesus is in the process of dying on the cross, what does the high priest do? He tears his garments. What happens to the temple curtain? It's torn in half. What happens to Jesus' body? It's pierced. In other words, his garments are divided at the bottom of the cross. In other words, Jesus came to this earth to be whole and then to experience our being torn apart, to demonstrate that he is the one who dies for our dividedness, for our divided hearts. That this is what Isaiah says. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And with his wounds, we are healed. See, friends, this is the idea. That Jesus, in his person, he allows us to look into the mirror, and what we look at in the mirror is we see a divided human being with a divided heart. And we say, yes, I am divided, but Christ has made me whole. And if Christ has made me whole, he will make every in-between thing whole. He will make rain on a graduation party, rain on your wedding day, the marriage not turning out the way you thought it would, The job not turning out the way you thought, your kids not turning out the way you thought they would. Everything will be made in victory in and through Jesus Christ according to his perfect way. But what all the world is longing to see in the interim is someone whose peace is intact, not broken apart. And the only way that can happen is for your mind to be stayed on the person of peace, not on the stuff that you think makes your peace. Let me pray. Father, our minds are stayed on you. Our hearts lean into you. Though the mountains give way, though the oceans tremble, the seas roar, Lord, you are our refuge and hiding place. Lord, you keep us calm in the midst of the weapons rattling, the ground shaking by foot of the soldiers. Lord, you are in charge of all things. Kings are like water in your hands. Lord, you build the city. You watch over the city. You build the house. Lord, help us to be at peace in the true things that make for peace. You, your ways, your equity, your justice, your love. Lord, help us to look to your ways versus our ways. And in all these things, Lord, help us to rest satisfied and allow us to be a spectacle of grace for those around us so that we might lead them in the way everlasting. And we pray it all in the name of your Son, Jesus, who modeled this and is in the process of imparting it to us right now as we speak. Amen. Musicians, would you please come?